All right, everybody. Looks like we've waited here for about 5 minutes. We'll hope everybody else will join us as we continue the evening, but why don't we go ahead and get started? Good evening, everybody. Hermanos, hermanas, hermanexes. Really appreciate all of you joining us tonight for the Transit Justice Coalition's second town hall discussion. Before we further get into things, we want to take some space for the interpreters tonight, just to explain some ground rules and ways that we can help support them through the evening and things to look out for. So with that, I'd like to start with Liliana. Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Muy buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the
Oh, I think
transit.
you might be in the interpretations channel still. No?
Oh, no, I'm not. Not yet. No, you can't hear me.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, great. Well, I'm just
can
gonna.
hear you.
Great.
We could hear you. We couldn't hear Carlos, but we could hear you.
Okay. Well,
Okay,
thank
then
you.
please
That's bad on.
continue, Liliana.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the Transit Justice Coalition for creating a multilingual space. I'm going to repeat this message briefly in Spanish. Muy buenas noches, bienvenidos todos aquí a esta reunión, la segundo diálogo de Transit Justice for All, la justicia de tránsito para todos. Queremos asegurar que sea un espacio multilingüe y con eso nomás les quiero dar una instrucción breve. Si está en el Zoom y gusta escuchar la interpretación en español, puede ir debajo al fondo de su pantalla, va a haber un icono de un globo, un globito así, y puede en ese momento seleccionar español y desde ese momento va a poder escuchar toda la interpretación simultáneamente en español. Y, so thank you. If you want to follow along by choosing the globe icon at the bottom of the screen, you can also listen in either in Spanish or in English or Cantonese. So whenever, if there are Cantonese and Spanish speakers speaking and you want to hear the interpretation into English, you can select English and listen that way. Muchas gracias, thank you. And again, language justice means justice for all. Buenas noches.
Thank you so much, Liliana. I appreciate both you and Andreina stepping in to help us with that tonight. And Kai, I'd like to give some space just for Kai to come in and just ways that we can help him.
You might have to select off on the interpretation feature globe in order to talk to the main room. If you're attempting to do that right now, that is.
Okay, we can try to work with Kai and then go back to it if we need to, but why don't we go ahead and get started? Just really appreciate again everybody being here. We have two important reasons for this town hall tonight. The first is to provide an opportunity for our communities to learn more about SFMTA board nominee Manny Yekutiel, his experience in transit and his perspectives on community questions regarding transit equity. Second is to help elevate visibility and awareness of the need for equity and justice in transit for marginalized people and communities of color, as well as essential workers living and working in San Francisco. And this second reason cannot be understated. And for that, I really appreciate everybody coming here tonight, and we express our sincerest gratitude to Mr. Yekutiel for his support and courage in helping to bridge this gap and not only elevate, but prioritize the voices and the needs of the communities we're honored to serve. To everyone participating and watching tonight, thank you. Thank you for sharing your strength and supporting the participation of people who have for too long been unjustly excluded from these processes. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to just go through a bit of some information and some ground rules that we'll be using for the evening. First, folks wishing to ask a question during the community questions portion of the town hall may do so by opening the chat in Zoom and selecting one of our moderators, Goulet or Winston, and sending them a private message with your questions. There, we got the friendly wave from Goulet, the man that met the legend, the wave from Winston. So those are the two to look out for. Our moderators will be collecting questions throughout the evening, and we'll call upon people to ask their questions during our community question portion. And you can also use the raise hand function on Zoom to be put on stack once the community question portion of the event has begun. Second, just a few ground rules that we have here tonight, just to make sure we all stay centered here in community and that the evening goes as smoothly as possible. The first is to please introduce yourself, the organization you're representing, if you have one, and your question. The second is to please keep your question and dialogue related to transit and centered within transit. And for those asking questions with experience to transit, please try to use transit terms in as common language as possible. Third, in an effort to ensure everyone in the community is heard, please be considerate of everyone's time by being as concise as you can with your question. During the community question portion, you're going to see Guled and Winston. If you're taking too long, they're going to be providing you a wrap it up signal. So keep your eyes out. Otherwise, you're going to get the audible signal from Winston. And I've been there. I don't, yeah, let's try to avoid that if we can. So number 4, use the raise hand function on Zoom to be put in stack, or open the chat in Zoom to select one of our moderators again, just in case you forgot, and send them the private message with your question. 5th, this is a family-friendly event. You will be automatically muted if you use any profanities or unsafe language during the Q&A. You will receive a warning before ejection for the following: talking over people will get you muted. Not respecting question time will get you muted. And if you're muted, you will not be re-admitted. We have our bouncer, Pyra, standing by. He's not just large in life, he's large online. So please, let's just be cautious as we're moving forward. And then finally, just a big reminder that this Zoom town hall is being recorded. So the recording will be available on the Transit Justice Coalition's Facebook page. So please come visit and like. Otherwise, with that said, it's a pleasure to introduce SFMTA board nominee, Manny Yekutiel, and have him share his experience in transit, his goals for the SFMTA, and other information he feels important in helping the community learn more about him before proceeding to the next segment. So with that, Manny, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and everyone at the Transit Justice Coalition. Oh, I'll speak a little bit slower, sorry. My name is Manny Yekutiel. I am 31 years old, originally from Los Angeles, California. So I'm very much a California boy. I do want to start this by saying Happy Hanukkah to everyone. We just lit the menorah in my small business. I come from an Orthodox Jewish family, and Hanukkah is a really important holiday to me and my family. It's one of the times that we all were able to get together. And I'll just say that the symbolism of lights right now, whether it's lights on a Christmas tree or on a menorah or any kinds of lights, are especially apt given the dark times that we're in. So happy Hanukkah to everyone. So I moved to San Francisco for the first time 10 years ago as a street canvasser, raising money with a clipboard for same-sex marriage. I lived at 3rd and Irving and took the N Judah to Powell Street every day that summer. Then I would get my assignment at whatever corner of the city I was in, and I would take whatever bus or underground line to get there. And so that first summer in 2010, I fell in love with San Francisco. And I fell in love with San Francisco through transit. It was through the windows of the N Judah, going past UCSF Parnassus, and then into the tunnel and back into and kind of into Powell Station, that my first experience of San Francisco was colored. I then returned to San Francisco 8 years ago after working as an organizer on the Obama campaign in New Hampshire. And for the first 5 to 6 years of living here, I relied 100% on public transit. I've never owned a car in San Francisco. I lived in the Mission and then moved to 24th and Castro, where I took the 24 line to Castro Station every day. Or if I was able to time it properly, I would take the 48 bus to the 24th Street BART station and take BART. Sometimes I would mix it up. I've worked in San Francisco at an immigration reform advocacy group. I had the honor of working on Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign, did some of my own consulting work, and a couple of years ago decided to make a dream come true and open up my own small business. Definitely didn't think that that's what I was going to do when I first moved here, but after the election of Donald Trump, I realized that I wanted to build a space for people to go to become more involved in civic and political life. And so the idea of a venue that had food and beverage, books, and political and civic programming came to mind. And it took me a few years and a lot of luck and a lot of help. But I built Manny's and we opened about 2 years ago. I come from a small business family. My father is an immigrant from Afghanistan. My grandfather was a merchant in Afghanistan. My father and my family own a small tablecloth company. And I remember waking up on Sunday mornings, pre-dawn, to load the van with tablecloths and sell them at Jewish festivals. My mother was from Brooklyn and her family's from Poland, and they owned a grocery store in Flatbush. And she would work in the family grocery store. So I'm here tonight to humbly ask for the support of the many member organizations that make up the Transit Justice Coalition for my nomination to the board of the SFMTA. I believe that I'd be a good addition to the board for 3 reasons. One is there's never been a small business brick and mortar owner on the SFMTA board. There's just never been anyone that actually is living, breathing small business the way I am right now in my small business on the board that is making so many decisions that impact small businesses. Like I said, I come from a small business family, and ever since opening up my own small business, I have fallen in love with the small business community here in San Francisco. These people are amazing, hardworking people. Today I had lunch with Amparo Vijal, who is one of the owners of Puerto Alegre. And she told me the story of her father and his 3 brothers coming here from Mexico, and how the small business world gave them a foot in this community. And she grew up in the restaurant that her father opened and now runs it. So I love my community. I love being a small business owner, but it's very difficult to be a small business owner in San Francisco. Combination of high costs, changing demands, and frankly, San Francisco, the city, making it harder than it needs to be, including some decisions that the SFMTA makes. So I think it's important to have a small business owner on the board. And I would be honored to represent that community tenaciously and with love and with strength. The second reason is I'm an organizer and I'm a community builder. I've been on 4 presidential campaigns, a couple local campaigns, LGBT rights, immigration reform. And frankly, I think it's a good time to have an organizer who's had a breadth of experience in different issues on the board, as it has to make difficult decisions in the coming months and years about its solvency, about what services it provides, and about what it represents in the San Francisco post-COVID and in the economic situation that we're in. And the third and final reason that I humbly ask for your support is a little selfishly, but my role at Manny's, being here, has allowed me to connect people to politics. I've interviewed literally hundreds of people in this city, every major department head. And one of the things that I am able to do is I'm kind of like a top of the funnel for a lot of people who aren't like us, already embedded in advocacy and organizing, people who have never experienced politics in any way, like the people who came to the victory booths outside Manny's to make phone calls and text messages in the last months before the election. And, you know, we talked about this earlier in the pre-call, and we've talked about this before. You know, public transportation affects the most vulnerable among us. And if those folks have something to say, they advocate to the department, it gets filtered up to different managers, maybe it gets to a department head, maybe then it gets to someone who's in charge of transportation or livable streets, then perhaps to the director of the agency, and then with his report to us, the 7 members of the board. And so what I would want to change is, you know, really I'm on the ground. I'm literally here on the corner, looking at the streets all day. People come into my small business. And so if I'm selected to be on the board, I would see myself as kind of the top of the funnel, bringing the board to the street level, to the ground floor, and be a direct connection from the people to the board. Last point I'll just say is my father was almost killed by a bus when he was riding a motorcycle as a young man in Israel. He was in the hospital for a few weeks, didn't think he was going to make it, but he did make it. And so for the pedestrian safety and bike safety and car safety is something that's personal to me. And I'll just close with this. I believe that mobility is freedom. And I've experienced that in my life when I first moved to San Francisco 10 years ago. I experienced this when I didn't have a car in LA and I took the Big Blue bus to get to Algebra 2 classes. And it is my belief that a city like San Francisco should aim to create access to that freedom for everyone. Full stop. Every part of the city, every single person. I believe that our transportation system can do that. I believe it should do that. And as San Franciscans, I believe it must do that. And so if I'm given the opportunity to serve, I promise to be a fierce advocate for all San Franciscans, most importantly, San Franciscans who rely on public transportation to get around, and will bring my perspective and my passion as a small business owner in community to the board as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manny. Thank you for sharing that with us. And so let's just go ahead and dig right into those organizational question segments first. And so to kick us off, the man, the myth, the legend of Central City organizing and in the mission representing the Transit Justice Coalition tonight is Guled Muse. Guled, please take it off.
Hey, Manny, first and foremost, thank you for doing this and taking the time out to speak with the community. So I wanted to kick off my first question to you, and that is the SFMTA Fair Enforcement Program has had a very controversial history with regard to racial and sexual discrimination, both in how and where the program has chosen to focus its efforts on enforcement. These problems are further exacerbated by the fact that in 2019, the program brought in only around $2.5 million a year, but cost $5.6 million to run, twice what it yielded in revenue. The question is the Fair Enforcement Program an inherently discriminatory program that should be discontinued, or do you believe changes can be made to the program that will make it both physically and socially accountable?
Thank you for that question. So the fair inspectors and their deployment, I've been digging into this, Guled, because I've wanted to learn kind of how do they figure out which lines they go on. And so the way it works is a full month calendar is created in advance, and daily they cover 8 lines, 4 lines on the day shift, 4 lines on the night shift. And 2 of those shifts are high capacity and 2 are low capacity. And the way they look at which lines to go to is they look at areas where there's a lot of people riding those lines, and also the amount of times they found someone that does not pay their fare. And then they balance that out with lines in which that are lower capacity and where they haven't had as many incidences. The one problem I see with this particular way of looking at a calendar of inspection is if you're concentrating in certain areas where you've seen a lot of violations of fares, all of a sudden, over time, that just becomes a line that you need to keep checking. And so you do see inspectors particularly going to areas, communities of concern, or targeting certain parts of the city where there is more fare evasion. And so I think it is probably time for a new look on how fare inspection happens in the city. In terms of the question of it costing more than it brings in, I think the answer that probably would come from the SFMTA is, while it costs more to hire fare inspectors than they bring in, if you are going to say you're charging for use of the SFMTA lines, the fare inspectors are a force that keeps people paying, right? It's the threat of being caught. I remember when I, was nervous, not sure if I could afford the $80 Clipper card when I was living here 10 years ago. I thought maybe I just don't get it. And then I thought, well, I don't want to get caught by a fare inspector and pay a big ticket. And so they would probably say that is something that keeps people paying, for their fee. Now, I don't think they should be armed, and I don't like the idea of police presence of any kind on our public transportation system if it's not, if it can be avoided. And I would love to see a San Francisco where Muni was free. I would love to see it, and you wouldn't need fare inspection if that happened. And so that's something that I would definitely explore as a SFMTA board member if I was selected, and that would eliminate the need for fare inspection. But as long as we're going to be charging people and expecting revenue from SFMTA lines, I understand the need to have inspectors there as a deterring force.
Okay. Yes, and thank you for that, because you did mention that you have a vision, or you are susceptible in wanting to see Muni become free, which is, my follow-up question. Prior to the pandemic, many in our community were raising their voices to the SFMTA board, demanding a broader and more equitable vision than Vision Zero, one that includes the public right to free Muni. So, I just wanted to ask once again, is your vision of the future transit system one that includes the public right to free Muni? If not, what is your vision and belief regarding Muni fares?
Right. So I would love to see Muni be free. I know right now, low and moderate income youth, seniors, and people with disabilities can ride Muni for free. And so in the public's mind, one of the things that will need to be answered is, if someone can afford to pay for Muni, and we've already created programs for people who can't, why shouldn't we charge them for it? And so that's a question that, I'm still wrestling with, frankly, and I'm trying to answer. If someone is making a lot of money and they want to take our public transportation system, why shouldn't we charge them to use it? At the same time, I know there's two things on my mind. One, right now, fare, or not right now, but before the pandemic, fare has made about 18% of revenue. And so Muni has been chronically underfunded over the years. And so if you're going to take away 18% of revenue, you have to find it from somewhere else. And so I would want to understand what the replacement would be. And two, Muni has historically had a big problem with booms and busts affecting its ability to deliver on basic services. And so I would love to see a way to create a dedicated revenue stream for Muni. And if we could find a way to do it that would also not require fares, then that's all the better. I think it would inspire civic pride. I think it would get even more ridership, which would require us to make changes to capacity to handle additional ridership. And it would be better for the environment. So I'm supportive of it, and I would love to see a way to make it happen.
That's so great. Thank you for that, because us in the Transit Justice Coalition and many other community groups are trying to work toward that. And just for a follow-up question, will you be committed to working with us along with Dean Preston and trying to make this dream a reality?
I'm definitely committed to working with you to try to make this dream a reality. It is something that I said to Supervisor Preston in my conversation with him. The questions I brought up are going to need to be answered as part of that dialogue. Was that for me, this?
Yeah, the question, yeah.
Should I be shorter?
Just to slow down a little bit. So
slow down. That's
yeah. That's the slow down side.
Oh, okay. I was like, shut up, Manny. Okay, slow down, Manny.
No, you slow down.
I think we're gonna need to explain to the public of San Francisco why we should not charge people who can't afford it. We're gonna have to explain how we're gonna pay for it, and how we will allow the Muni to deliver on its services excellently into the future. And if we can find a way to answer those questions, I'm 100% on the front of that line. And so the answer is yes, I'm happy to work with you, and I commit to working with you all on that.
Right on, thank you. And just one last question. What is your position regarding Muni fare increases, considering the wake of the recent revelations that the SFMTA is facing imminent budget shortfalls and staffing cuts? How would you prioritize maintaining the rates of existing fares as compared to other items within the budget, such as employee income for the most senior positions of the SFMTA?
Mm-hmm. So I do not think that it is the right time for fare increases, given how many people in our city are out of work, suffering, sick. And so that is my position on it, that if I were asked to vote on fare increases right now, I would vote against it, because it's just not the right time to make it more expensive to get around San Francisco. Obviously questions about budget and money flow in and out and trade-offs would have been very different a year ago than they are right now, when the Muni is literally talking about potentially having to lay off over 1,000 people to stay solvent. I think we can take this one step at a time. What happens on January 5th will have a direct impact on whether or not Muni will need to make certain decisions about its budget, because we know that a democratically controlled Senate is much more amenable towards a beefed up stimulus bill than a Republican-controlled Senate. So I want to see what happens on January 5th, and I want to help us win on January 5th. And then we want to see what the Republican Senate's bill before inauguration includes for public transit. Right now, I think it has $200 million for San Francisco or something like that. But of course, all of that is subject to change. And then we have to understand what our budget situation is, come February, and have to make a decision then based on trade-offs. But right now, at this particular moment, I do not think that fare increases are the right thing to do in this moment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you so much, Guled, for those questions. Now let's go ahead and move to somebody who might have helped build the transit system, Pyra, an active bicyclist. Please take it away.
Oh, you give me too much credit. Yes, I'm Pyra. I'm with Senior and Disability Action. And so my question is going to be focusing my two questions on paratransit. What is your knowledge of the San Francisco paratransit program? And what paratransit issues do you find vital to address in order to improve this ADA required service for people with disabilities?
Oh, I'm not on mute. Okay. So I have not utilized paratransit myself, but I have I've done some research on paratransit, and also how paratransit has kind of stepped up to the plate in the recent months to take on some additional roles in the pandemic that we have right now. Things like the Essential Trip Card Program. I have it here, the Emergency Medical Transport Service, the Pier 94 shuttle, and also, from the report that I received from SFMTA, paratransit has been done a much better job recently. Maybe it's because congestion's gone down, of being reliable and on time. But I know actually from watching this town hall 2 weeks ago from my co-nominee Fiona, that driver reliability and driver retention has been an issue for paratransit, and it's something that of course needs to be looked at and worked on. But I'm really excited and proud that paratransit has helped so much recently. I also know that some of the additional work being done for taxis and picking up the slack with taxis has been helped out by paratransit. And so it's an essential service. I know it's a huge priority for SFMTA. I believe their contract is coming up for renegotiation, if I'm not mistaken, and they'd like to continue it for a while longer. And I actually feel like we should be thinking more about alternative ways to get people in and around San Francisco in a pinch, other than underground subway lines, and even in some cases above ground bus lines. And so paratransit is part of that system.
Good. And since you did mention taxis.
Yes, taxis.
And, yes, I'm trying to find the question here. Bear with me. Oh, here it is. Just a little, how do you call it, intro to the question. Taxis provide over 50% closer to 60% of the paratransit service. Mm-hmm. So starting with that, here's the question. The San Francisco City Charter declares that San Francisco is a transit-first city and includes taxi cabs in that definition of transit. What do you think of taxis as a part of the city's public transit system?
Well, I think taxis have had it really hard, obviously, the last 10 years with TNCs swarming the city and not being regulated by the city. Obviously, I have a deep place in my heart for the folks who had to spend so much money, in some cases, taking loans out to buy medallions that in short order became worthless. I try to take taxis as much as I can. I don't like to take TNCs if I have to get around in a car. I will say that taxis, have also stepped up to the plate recently with COVID-19. And I think SFMTA has shown up for taxis recently as well, waiving all taxi related fees, establishing the Essential Trip Card Program, the essential worker ride home program, providing PPE to taxi drivers. But to answer your question, Pyra, I mean, I hope that taxis can find that we can bring taxis back in a bigger way, because I think what's happened over the last 6 to 8 years of TNCs coming in, undercutting them on price, the medallions being undervalued. I think it's a shame, and I think it's something that we're going to look back on and think, could we have done more? So I do think it's an essential part of San Francisco's transport system, but it's a part of San Francisco's transport system which seems like it's on life support at this point.
I like that. And I just want to close off that. Thank you for that answer. I'm not a taxi driver, but if it wasn't for taxi business, we wouldn't have paratransit. I was in the very beginning, and the taxi industry really got paratransit going back in the 80s when we first started prior to the 88. So thank you for your answers.
You're welcome. I see taxi drivers as small business owners, I just have to say. And so I bring them into the small business community because it is like a small business in some ways.
Thank you so much, Pyra, for those questions. Next up, we have the Richmond Democratic Club. Thank you for joining us tonight. And Wendy Aragon, I'll pass it off to you.
Hi, Manny. How are you?
Hi, Wendy.
Good to see you.
You too.
So the West Side has one of the largest growing populations of aging residents. Here in Richmond, we've lost 3 of our bus lines that may not be seen as major arteries, but for seniors, they are the 2 Clement, the 31 Balboa, and the 18 Stonestown. Please describe your West Side transportation and mobility vision, especially as it relates to the often unreliable and limited north to south transit, bike, and auto connections amidst an aging population in the Sunset and the Richmond.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I mean, if you look at a map of the Muni Core Service Plan and you look at the West Side, I mean, it's like, maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. I mean, there's a lot of gaps there, people. I mean, there's like a lot of parts of the West Side where, it would be very hard for you to get to one of these core service lines. And of course, they're not coming as often as they used to as well. My West Side plan would be, of course, as soon as we can restore service to some of these lines, I think we should. Obviously, depending on the line, going through a community process about which lines should be restored and the frequency. I know there's a lot of attention being paid to Fulton. Fulton, of course, is a street that has a lot of accidents. It's on the injury network, and so we want to make it a safer street. I do have to say that the Outer West Side is probably one of my favorite parts of San Francisco. Last time I did date someone that lived at 19th and Geary, and so I spent a lot of time on Geary. And my favorite coffee shop is actually all the way at 45th and Irving, Trouble Coffee, and so I do spend some time out in the outer avenues. But in terms of the answer to your question about north-south and what a West Side plan looks like, I just don't think we're going to be able to bring enough mass heavy public transit out to the West Side in the short or medium term to address access needs. And so I do think it's 2020 and we need to start thinking about what are other ways that we can get people from where they are to where they want to go in a safe, equitable, and accessible way that maybe does not rely on a big, expensive system. Whether that looks like beefing up the taxi program, giving people, what we've done recently is people get debit cards sent to them who are seniors or folks with disabilities. They get double their value and they can use that to take taxis and other forms of transportation. And so I don't want us to be boxed in by one form of transportation. I want us to think outside the box and innovatively about what are other ways to get people from where they are to where they need to go, who maybe don't live super close to a bus or Muni line.
Great. And our second question is, are there any intersections between race, class, gender, ability, and more that you think the agency could better serve, and how?
Well, obviously, as we've seen, thank you for that question. Obviously, as we've seen in recent months, and obviously this has been apparent for a long time, there is a problem with racial discrimination within SFMTA. The new position in the office of the exact name of the position is in the Office of Race, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm really glad that that position has been created and that's being filled, and they're going to have someone occupy that manager role soon. But that is an issue in the agency, and my stance on this is you have to get your own house in order before you can tell other people, how to get their house in order. And so the SFMTA has things it needs to do to get its house in order for sure as it relates to racial equity, racial discrimination. And then of course, class connects to all of those things in some way. In well, not all of them, but a bunch of them. And like I said in my opening remarks, our public transportation system should be accessible to everyone. And the first obstacle that I think we all need to make sure are being removed in our city is class, making it no one should not be able to afford getting around San Francisco. That should never come into your mind. You should always be able to afford getting around our city. And so where there are obstacles as it relates to class, I think we need to be combating those with full strength.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions, Wendy. Speaking of the unsung heroes of transit, next up we have Peter Miller with the San Francisco Taxi Workers Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Peter.
Thank you, Carlos. Manny, thank you for joining us tonight. I really just have one question tonight, and that is Muni is facing imminent budget shortfalls and staffing cuts. And at the same time, inequities with the transit system have led to a spike in medallion loan foreclosures on taxi drivers, which I'm happy that you are already aware of. These essential workers and their families are unjustly struggling immensely during the pandemic. Please share your perspective on operator income and your commitment to working with our communities to create livable wages for our Muni and taxi operators, mechanics, and other staff to ensure that they can also afford to live in the city that they serve.
Thank you so much for that question. The taxi thing is something I do care a lot about. I don't know if you all read the story. It's not about the story that was in the New York Times a couple of months ago. It wasn't about San Francisco taxi drivers, but it talked about an epidemic of suicide amongst taxi drivers in New York City. These are grown men, a lot of whom are immigrants from countries like the country my father came from, who put everything they had to buy a taxi medallion and have and almost overnight lost everything. And some have killed themselves because of it. And so, we have to address this. I know that the lawsuit is moving forward because mediation was not successful and it's set for March of 2021. So you'll put the medallion thing on the side. I'm not on the board, and I haven't followed every piece of the lawsuit, but I have to say that I am heartened to see how the SFMTA has supported the taxi industry during the pandemic, waiving fees, establishing the trip card program to facilitate people paying, taking taxis and paying for them, providing tons of PPE, sanitizers, providing sanitizing fluid, procuring and distributing clear plastic shields, increasing the per vehicle rebate. There's a bunch of stuff here. Obviously, there's a long list of things that the SFMTA has done just for the pandemic to help with their taxi drivers. And so I think that's a good first step. I think making it less expensive, kind of getting out of the way, less onerous to operate a taxi is a good step. And I'm wondering what the fiscal impacts of that are long term. I don't know how you feel about this. I'm still kind of mixed about the only allowing taxis with medallions to pick folks up at SFO. I've heard that only allowing taxis with medallions might help the taxis with medallions, but if it means that there are fewer taxis and people don't take the taxi anymore because you can't find them at the airport, then that might actually hurt in the long run. So would love to hear your thoughts on that. But really, in a budget scenario like we're in, where you're hemorrhaging money, realistically what I think we can expect from not just the SFMTA, but any city agency. And we're talking about this on the Small Business Commission right now, which I serve on honorably. Is can the city get out of the way a little bit? Can it reduce fees or waive fees? Can it help? Can it just make this? Can it allow us to make it a little more possible to survive the moment that we're in? And I think we should definitely expect that. And on top of that, actually providing direct remuneration, funding, and support for particular industries, whether it's the taxi industry or the small business community, you know, something that we should always be fighting for. And I think we should fight for, certainly for the taxi community.
Well, just to respond to your question about the airport.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's not going to work. Even the people that are supposedly benefiting from it think that the airport is just so dead at the moment that it's not going to help. And it really feels like it's more just the MTA trying to look like it's doing something when it's worthless. So that's how it's actually, you know, the taxi industry, you know, drivers, medallion holders, even the companies are all more united than they ever have been because of things like this. And historically, none of us have ever gotten along with each other about anything. And on this thing, you know, it's just like nobody thinks it's going to work.
Well,
the other thing that I wanted to ask, or go ahead.
I was just going to say, my promise to you is I will always be available. You'll always know where I stand, and you'll always be able to speak to me directly if you need to about an issue or a decision, and you know, give me your direct perspective. And I'm happy to meet with the taxi drivers as well, whether now, the future, or at any time.
That is very glad to hear that. And as Fiona, who I see is also here, hi Fiona, pointed out last time, taxi drivers really just don't feel like they're being heard, or have been for a long time. So that goes a long way. The other thing that I wanted to refer back to the question is we tried to ask that question about both Muni and taxi drivers, because there needs to be more focus on equity between the operators of our system. And a lot of the time we always focus on the Muni operators and taxi drivers. It's kind of like if there isn't a taxi driver in the room, then we forget that taxis are actually part of our transit first policies. So you spoke a lot about taxis just now, but I want to make sure that we look at the Muni drivers as well, who are looking at budget cuts. There are potential layoffs in the future, and also the staff and the mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a punt on the taxi question, but I do have to say, one of the best things that we could figure out a way to do is to take the regulation of TNCs out of the California Public Utilities Commission and into the city, and make it easier for the city to actually regulate TNCs, to give taxis a fighting chance to reclaim their market share. And so, you know, I don't know exactly how we do that. Obviously, that's outside of my particular hands, but you know, I would definitely, I wish that there was a way that we could make that happen.
Well, let's talk about it in the future. And there
Okay.
is something about that going to the MTA board on this Tuesday, I believe.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I definitely, that'll be before I'm on, if I'm confirmed, but.
Right. Okay, well, that's all I have then. Thanks a lot, Manny.
Nice to meet you. I appreciate your Hawaiian shirt game.
Thank you.
Right on. Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate your questions. Next up, we have one of the transit champions of the West Side. We have Winston Parsons from the Richmond Senior Center. Winston, please go ahead.
Thanks, Carlos. Welcome, Manny. I appreciate you taking the time to come here tonight. I know you're a busy guy. My first question is the current process for requesting curb colors, so blue zones, yellow, white, green, requires businesses or individuals, including most nonprofit service providers, to apply for a permit that can cost thousands of dollars per year. This has proven an obstacle to expanding passenger loading and disabled parking zones. Would you support changing the system? And if yes, how so?
So thank you for that question, Winston. As it was described to me, that nonprofits that provide free services exclusively to seniors and people with disabilities educational facilities operated by the SFUSD, and then government agencies, they can apply for color curbs, their red zones, white zones, and green zones for free. Is that not the case on your end? Because I heard that those entities can apply for these zones without having to pay these fees.
That's correct. If you're like a nonprofit senior center, like the one I work at, they'll say that the nonprofit preschool that's on the ground floor of the building that I work in does not qualify for that exemption because it is not an SFUSD institution. Right?
I see. So you're saying,
and I'm also thinking about businesses too.
Listen, I think everything, I would love for everything to be free. You know, I don't want parking to cost anything. You know how many parking tickets I've gotten for street cleaning and putting my car in the wrong place, my Vespa in the wrong place, or, you know, how many, you know, I would like, yes, of course, I would love to see it that way. We have to ask the question, you know, what is that revenue doing? How much is it bringing in? And how much of an effect on equity and on the overall budget would it have to make a program less expensive or free for certain communities that are either for profit or not within the current bounds? It does seem to me, Winston, that making it free for government agencies, educational facilities operated by our public school system, and for nonprofits that serve seniors and people with disabilities is a great first start. In terms of specifically for small businesses and schools that are not with SFUSD, I mean, I would love for it to be free. I would want to find out what the numbers look like before I would say yes or no on that. And so that's my answer. Is it depends on how much money it brings in, what that money is being used for. You know, it was explained to me that it's a cost recovery program where they're using the money that they bring in to review the applications and go through the process. You know, we do need to have processes for certain things. If you ask me, and this isn't specific to the SFMTA, but I would say this citywide, seems like we have a little too many processes for a little too many things in some cases. It's costing a lot of money just to get through it. I can tell you as a small business owner, I got my unified license fees today for 2020, and it cost me thousands of dollars in cost recovery to review that I can once again be a place of assembly. And, you know, it's a lot of money for someone to pay to have something be reviewed. And so, you know, the whole cost recovery system, to me, I have lots of questions about it. And, you know, I'm not afraid to ask them.
Cool. I appreciate that. I guess the additional or the second part to that would be less so much the cost for the applicant, but more the fact that there is a burden on or an onus on one individual merchant or service provider to determine what happens to the curb nearby versus like a comprehensive holistic look at a corridor and saying, hey, we have a loading need here. Hey, we have ADA needs here. I guess.
Well, I think it depends on whether the applicant is a business or a non-profit entity, because they obviously have different needs for the curb, or maybe not obviously. And so you do have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, because every business is different and every nonprofit is different. For instance, if you have a nonprofit that's asking for a certain curb, but it's like pretty clear that whatever they're doing maybe doesn't require it's an exclusive curb use or a small business, you know, not everyone is doing that, but we do need to make sure that there's a fair system to decide where one of these, you know, colored curbs go to.
Would you be, I guess I'd be curious to just wrap this question up. Would you be supportive of like my personal interests, like on corridors like Erie, Valencia, Clement, just like an agency or community-led process to say, let's look at the curb as a whole and the agencies and entities that are there, rather than one at a time applying for a permit?
I would be amenable to that, but I would imagine that the specific department within SFMTA that reviews applications for different curb color uses is taking into account what else is happening on the curb. I imagine that's what the review process should all be about. And so my first question would be, is that not happening? If it's not happening, then it certainly should happen. But my guess is that is, and inform me if it's not the case. My guess is when an application comes in for, Winston's, watches or whatever, to have a green zone on Terraval, which, you can trademark that if you want, that the person in plan check or the reviewer is looking, okay, well, where is Winston's watches? Is there another green zone next to it? Are there 17 shared spaces actually now around it and there's no parking? And so we need that one parking spot because where else are people going to park? So I hope that that's already happening, Winston. And if it's not, please let me know and we can continue this conversation if I do get confirmed.
Cool. My second question, you spoke a bit earlier to this about your introduction to San Francisco through transit. I'm hoping maybe you can expand upon this. What have you done? What would you do to bolster both your firsthand and systems-wide understanding of the city's transit network, especially the less visible or prestigious lines, given that they're often so critical to the mobility of residents, workers, and visitors?
Yes, so so in terms of my firsthand riding experience use case as a customer, I think I already went into that in my opening remarks. I will also say that I am unique in some ways in that as a small business owner and as a member of the Small Business Commission with a brick and mortar business, I've also engaged directly with SFMTA on projects that affect the vitality of commercial corridors in the last few years. One is I've sat on the 16th Street Bus Improvement Project Construction Mitigation Task Force. That is the full name of it. It is very long.
It's a mouthful.
But SFMTA is planning on putting red lanes and improvements on 16th Street, which has a lot of legacy businesses, mom and pop shops, and places that, if construction is not mitigated properly, could lose their shirts. And so I wanted to make sure I was involved in that deliberative process. The second, of course, is the Shared Spaces Program. And I, on behalf of the Valencia Corridor Merchants Association, of which I'm on the board, helped work through the massive set of bureaucracies and set up coordinating calls with DPW, OEWD, SFMTA, the mayor's office, both supervisorial offices, and the VCMA to figure out a way to close the street to allow small businesses to open up. And so I've had experience both advocating and working with SFMTA as a small business owner, and then personally using the SFMTA routes. That was the first part of your question. To the second part of your question, how would I, as a board member, try to understand the system better? So first, I am excited that as part of a board member orientation, you and I
slow
asked,
down a bit, please.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
I asked if this was possible, and they let me know that this actually is part of the process of becoming a new board member. If I'm confirmed, is you actually get to go to the different bus depots, meet with the different operators, understand different line routes in terms of how they work, what are the issues with those line routes. In my conversations with now 10 out of 11 supervisors, and I'm having my 11th conversation tomorrow, I have learned, I've just scratched the surface on the specifics of each particular Muni-related issue in the 11 supervisorial districts, but that has been edifying, and I will continue those conversations. And then the last piece, Winston, is it is on my shoulders to make sure that I am riding Muni, all kinds of lines of Muni, on different parts of the city as often as possible. Obviously, right now, because of the pandemic, Muni is asking that people take essential trips only, and so I would honor that. But once the pandemic is over, I plan to, and maybe you can come with me, and we can go to the Richmond and take as many, the lines that don't get as much attention as the ones that you always hear being talked about.
Thank you, Manny. I appreciate it.
And sorry, I'm speaking so quickly. I'll try to slow down.
It's a problem I also have, so you're not alone.
Well, right on. Thank you so much, Winston, for those questions. I really appreciate it and taking the time to come here. I know folks got a lot of burning questions, so we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're just ending this on a strong note. And we have the People's Congress and the remarkable Reggie up next. And so, Reggie, please take it away. We'd love to hear your questions. Oh, I think you're on mute, Reggie.
Ashley, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My questions are related to Muni, SFMTA. Forgive my teeth, it sounds weird. My question, wait a minute, 1 second. My question is, number one, what should be the determinants of which Muni lines to restore to service first?
Are you done, Reggie?
Well, this is part of the question, but you
Okay.
can answer that part, please.
Okay. Well, Reggie, thank you for that question. I would obviously would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think the process that happened that happened in the lead up to the 27 Bryant being reinstated, which I think is happening January 23rd, is a good process, a collaborative process with stakeholders in the community that utilize those lines most, and in this case, in the Tenderloin community, to fill gaps that have been created by the COVID service plan. I know in the Tenderloin, the COVID service plan did include frequent service from the 38 Geary and the 5 Fulton, but that left a very important north-south gap. And I have spoken to Dell about this, and he expressed to me that the 27 Bryant, though those 6 blocks of the 27 Bryant took people up, north and south to the hospital, was extremely important, and removing that left a lot of people vulnerable. And so the process, to answer your question, should be collaborative, and it should be led by the community that utilizes these routes most.
How should real equity and justice apply to that choice then?
Well, the framework first of all, as a board member, decisions like these are made by the staff and presented to the board, and we ask questions and then vote. But the framework that I assume the SFMTA would use in this case, because I have seen it to a certain extent be used in a way that I feel pretty good about by Director Tumlin in how he chose what lines to cut, is that the folks that rely most exclusively to have access to the city to get around, who otherwise do not have the means, financial means, or other means to get around, should be prioritized first. Basically, what I mean is, if you're in an area or there's a high concentration of people in your area that this is the exclusive mode of transport for you, taking that away is the most inequitable thing to do. And so I have seen the way Director Tumlin has prioritized the existing bus routes in the city, with some exceptions, in the core service plan to put equity front and center and our essential and frontline workers front and center. And I imagine that the process, and I would hope that the process of reinstating lines when that should happen, would use the same framework.
It appears to me that they decided these things without considering the people in the Tenderloin, because there's a lot of seniors down here, disabled people down here, elderly people down here who rely on transit to get around, and for them to arbitrarily decide to do that, I thought was quite inequitable and incredible that they even consider it, as you have many varieties down here, many who rely on it. Next question is, how would
Reggie,
you—
before you go to the next question, are you specifically talking about the elimination of the 27 Bryant?
No, not just the 27 Bryant, but the 31 bus as well.
Okay.
We have both of them, and how they decided to just cut those is unbelievable. I don't understand it. But
well, okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to say I am glad that it's taken a while, but I'm glad that the 27 Bryant is being reinstated on January 23rd. And I know it's taken a long time to get that to happen, Reggie, but I'm sure you were involved in that, and I'm glad it's happening.
Well, thank you for that answer. The next one is, how would you change the way SFMTA treats the people who are living in the marginalized areas, keep them from feeling that they're constantly being thrown away?
Well, the SFMTA provides a public service, and that service is transportation. So I think the feeling of, I don't want to speak for the way someone feels, but the way the SFMTA, to directly answer your question, can address folks feeling thrown away is making sure that their services are being provided to the folks who need it most as often as possible, with reliability and with professionalism. And we're in a very tough situation where there are only 17 lines left out of 89, and the SFMTA is dealing with extreme budget realities. And so this is going to be a test of how the SFMTA maintains its public service to communities who need it most in the face of a disastrous economy. And I think it's prioritizing equitably the people who need its services most. As it relates to a feeling about SFMTA, it's a customer service agency. We should be making sure that the customer service is at the highest level it can be, and that people feel heard by the SFMTA and appreciated by its employees and served by them, because it is a public service. And so looking forward to working with you on that in the future, on making sure that people don't feel thrown away by the SFMTA.
One more thing, please.
All right.
I would just want to express this point of view here, is that I feel that as a service for people, it's been quite lacking. And it seems to me that all these agencies are only considering one thing, the bottom line, how much money they can get, how much money they can give. It's all about them getting more money. And I think it's got to stop. Because as a service, if I'm doing you a service, I'm concerned about you. I'm not concerned what I can get from you. I'm concerned about you. I'm done. Thank you. And
thank you, Reggie. Thank you, Reggie.
Thank you so much for those questions, Reggie. Really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. With that does it for me, folks. I will be joining you in the audience. We're going to be moving this along to a far better crew than me. Goulet and Winston, please take us to the burning questions in the community question portion.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you, everybody.
Goulet, you wanna take the first one?
Yeah, but before we get started, I just want to establish the ground rules once again. As far as asking the questions, please keep it civil. Otherwise, we got our bouncer. Who's gonna escort you out. But I assume that everybody here is asking these burning questions for that's transit related. Please keep it transit related. And that'll be it. So the first on the list here is we got John. John, are you on the line? Do you have a question?
John's not. He did send a question to us. I'm happy to ask it, or attempt to ask it.
And that's also, by the way, too, just one last point. We're pressed. We have a time schedule as well too. So please keep your questions to 2 minutes max. Otherwise, we're gonna give you the world around gesture. So that'll be it. So yeah, Winston, go ahead.
Sure. John was proposing, and maybe I can turn this into question. Was saying, quote, instead of fare increases, let's charge for parking on Sundays, end quote. So maybe the question out of this is, what's your response to John? Would you support that? Alternatives to it? Take it away, Manny.
Well, I don't know that I love making it less expensive for one person, more expensive for the other so much. And I know that free Sunday parking is something that a lot of us appreciate very deeply. Again, I don't have a car, but so I guess my answer is I would have to see what what's going to happen is the board is going to get and is currently getting a slew of options for what it can do to close the budget gap. And I'm sure that Sunday parking is going to be one of those things. And frankly, I'd want to talk to the other board members and see what they think about it, and also who is impacted by Sunday parking. I believe that free Sunday parking has something to do with churches and ecumenical organizations. I'm not 100% sure, but I have to imagine that it's the case. And I also would want to see what the small business impact and whether or not the small business community feels like free Sunday parking is something that brings much needed economic activity to our commercial corridors, which of course have been decimated in this pandemic. And so I would want to know a bunch more things before I made a decision on that. I'm not ready to make that decision right now.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. And this second question is from Claire Sophia. Claire, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much, Manny. I just kind of wanted to hear from you in a more macro perspective and understand, like, what are the 3 things that are most important to you, and what do you want people to understand about your overall goals in this position?
Thank you for that. Claire, is that your name? Can't see you.
Clara Sophia.
Clara Sophia. Things that are important to me in general, or as it relates to the SFMTA?
As it relates to the SFMTA and your
Okay.
in this new role.
Okay. So like I said, we all bring our filter to the work that we do. And I would be lying to you if I didn't say that my filter in a lot of ways is as a small business owner. And I understand that I would be the first brick and mortar small business owner to ever be on the SFMTA board. And so I want to make it easier for small business owners in this town who are disproportionately represented by communities of color and women and immigrants to do what they're doing. So SFMTA and the small business community have historically there's been a lot of tension between the two communities. And I would love to see a stronger working relationship between the small business community and SFMTA, and actually have the SFMTA be a part of the San Francisco small business comeback narrative. In some ways, the Shared Spaces program has been just that. It's given small businesses like mine a lifeline and a chance of survival. The second thing is I want to make the SFMTA more transparent and more accessible for the average person. And this is just my philosophy in general about government and our city government. It's complicated. There's a $13 billion budget. Where does all that money come from? Where does it go? Who's making these decisions? It's confusing for me. And I think as a board member, I would want to demystify the process. It's a beast of an agency. And so doing that won't be easy, but I would like to bring more transparency and accessibility into what this $1.3 billion a year, over 6,000 employee agency does. And the third thing I've said, a couple times tonight, but I want to see the SFMTA establish a permanent, reliable, economy-proof form of revenue, budget revenue, so that it is not, its ability to do its work is not at the whim of the boosts, what is the term? Booms and busts.
Boom and bust.
I was about to say something inappropriate. The booms and busts of our economy. That's not any way to run an essential agency. And so we need to establish this reliable source of funding, an additional reliable source of funding. There are already a few that allow it to keep doing what it's doing. And then I know you said 3, but unfortunately I have 4. The fourth one is, how do we make sure that we're able to keep the agency solvent? And unfortunately, that's where we are economically, while also not having to lay off anyone if we don't have to, or certainly as few people as possible, and also maintain core service to the folks who need it most. Unfortunately, it's not a very fun time to be on the board of the SFMTA.
And then my last question, I guess, would be, how do you think you own a business in the Mission, and so specifically within the Mission District, what changes would you like to see?
Well, the biggest elephant in the room as it relates to the SFMTA and the Mission, of course, are the red transit-only lanes on Mission Street, which, depending on who you speak to, people have a lot of different opinions on why they were built and what they've done, and what they currently do. I have already spoken to the agency about this before I was even, being considered for this position. And I understand the need for speeding up transit. The bus lines on Mission, are the most the 49, the 14, and the 14R, of course, are the most either the most or the second most utilized buses in the city, and in many ways delivering essential workers and frontline workers right now to their jobs. At the same time, I have to imagine there has been a disastrous effect on Mission Street's commercial activity by making it practically illegal for cars to drive on the street, and by forcing people to take turns at Cesar Chavez and I think it's 18th off of the street. I don't think the red lanes are going away, but it's possible that we could take another look at the forced right turns, and also just thinking of how we can bolster the commercial corridor on Mission Street, which of course was, one of the crown jewels of the Mission. And now there are a lot of vacancies and a lot of businesses have failed. And so would love to take a look at what has happened and what could happen on Mission Street. And that would be probably the main transit related thing. And then the 16th Street, improvement project, I have a lot of questions about that. Another set of red lanes on 16th Street, years potentially of construction right after a pandemic when people were forced to close for months. I understand the need to increase speed from, east west in the city, but I want to make sure that if as the SFMTA makes improvements in the Mission District, that the baby is not being thrown out with the bathwater, and that we're not seeing businesses close as a result of the improvements.
Just a quick follow-up and then I'll be done. Am I on the 2-minute?
You're close, but I think we've still got time. Keep it brief.
Okay. At this early stage, when you're talking about trying to, encourage some of these businesses on Mission Street, which are having a hard time, do you have any ideas of what that would look like if it doesn't look like getting rid of the red lanes on Mission Street?
Yeah, so we have to put the framework of pandemic time first, because I think it is a different set of proposals in the system that we're in now than it would be, God willing, 3 to 6 months when this is over. But right now, the shared spaces program for businesses that can bring their wares outside is one of the few tools at folks' disposal to bring their community back for necessary economic activity. And the city has shown up with shared spaces and provided equity grants to small businesses. The mayor just announced this past week $5,000 grants to businesses, many of whom on Mission Street would qualify for to build their parklets. And so while we are not able to bring people inside our businesses, having the city help those businesses, in particular, Calle 24 and Mission Street, take advantage of these programs to bring their customers back, I think is one thing they can do, potentially with street closures as well. But after the pandemic, I could be here all night talking about the ways in which San Francisco as a city can do better to help its small businesses. I think it's about eliminating our unified license bill fees. I think it's about not charging small businesses for tables and chairs. It's about reducing registration fees, business tax. I think it should be free to start a small business. If you check certain boxes, the city should waive all startup fees. I'm actually working on that with some folks in City Hall. There's a lot of things that are on my mind, and I would be happy to have a one-on-one with you to talk about ways in which San Francisco can make it easier for small businesses to survive in this town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next up, Mr. Richard Rothman.
Hello, and my name's Richard. Can you hear me? My name's
Yes.
Richard Rothman, and I live in the outer Richmond, working on transit projects with Wendy and Winston. And the last two conversations, I've never heard you say anything about sustainable streets. That's a major part. And I think somebody who follows Vision Zero and very active in making Fulton Street safe. Fulton Street's like the International Speedway. They need to slow traffic down. And I think we're on course to more people are dying in collisions. We just had one on 38th and Gary about a week ago. And I think sustainable streets need to be overhauled or make substantial changes. And I was wondering if you've looked into this issue and have any ideas how to make them more responsible to the needs of the citizens, and why they treat the Richmond district like we're in outer, like we're the county. I don't know. They call downtown the city and we're the county. So I like your comments.
Thank you, Richard Rothman from the Richmond. It's almost a jingle just right there. You don't even have to add a tune to it. Your question about starting with Fulton Street. I know that the Fulton Street Safety and Transit Project has been, going on for a while. I know that recently the items 1B, 1C, B, and 1C, GGG, 1D, and 1F have been referred to the board for final approval. These are things like the 10-foot red zone east of the crosswalk on the south side of Fulton and 39th Avenue, and then a lot of other safety improvement projects like transit bulbs, daylighting, of course, and sidewalk walking. Obviously we are not anywhere close to meeting our goals on Vision Zero, and Fulton Street is a part of that, an important part of that. And I'm glad that the city is taking it seriously. I know a lot of people are involved in it, and I look forward to kind of digging in, because the Fulton Street project is, there's a lot going on between the daylighting, the safety focus segments, the bulb outs, and all the different improvement ideas that are coming up for Fulton. So to me, like coming from just a layman's perspective, it's good to see that there's so much attention happening on how to make Fulton Street in particular more safe. Does seem like there's a lot of ideas out there, and that the process is moving along. I believe the current project timeline is that right now in winter 2020 is that community feedback part, and then in the spring is when the project recommendations are actually going to be fully fleshed out. And so looking forward to seeing what those recommendations end up being after everything is discussed. As it relates to the West Side feeling like a county, I guess, Wendy asked a somewhat similar question about, how do we make sure that there's access to getting around? And again, I just don't see having, the system is just not in a place where it can financially handle, adding 10 more bus lines to the West Side anytime soon. And so I do think that there are some things that can be done relatively quickly. I think making it easier for people who need to get around, specifically folks who are disabled, people living with disabilities, or seniors, to have money to use paratransit, or taxis. I think the Slow Streets program has been amazing, both for pedestrian safety, for sustainability, and for general civic pride and walkability. And I know that there have been a fair amount of slow streets on the West Side, and would love to know what West Side people, I know that they have their own particular feelings about that, but I think the Slow Streets program is something that doesn't cost a lot. It can have a real effect on a community, and would love to see the slow streets on the West Side that West Side folks are appreciating stick around after the pandemic if it's what the community wants.
Just to follow up those.
Richard, I'm so sorry, but we are very short on time. And I know I'm confident that you can get hold of Manny separately if you need.
Well, you'll tell me how.
I will. Yeah. Next up is Sue Vaughn. And before Sue, you start, Manny, I just want to make sure we're respecting your time. Do you have a hard end at 7:30?
I do not. I am here for you all tonight. So, and I own a coffee shop, so I can have as much coffee as I want. Well, so I'm here until everyone is done with their questions.
Okay. Well,
or the storeroom is out of coffee.
Yeah.
I'm the one with the coffee, so it's really, are you guys okay with it?
Fair point. Sue, go ahead, and we'll try and keep questions moving and ask people.
Okay. All right. So wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Winston, and thank you, Manny, for being here. So I'm Sue Vaughn. I live out in the Richmond district also, and I'm on the MTA-CAC. And there's another elephant in the room here, and it's been here for a few years. looming there, and you're a member of the SFMTA board of the directors, you're a nominee, and it's an elephant you're going to have to deal with. It's going to be in the back of your mind, and it's the privatization of things that are legally set aside for transit only. And transit is defined as public buses, public vehicles. So these are public buses and taxis. So I'm talking about public bus stops, and I'm talking about the transit only red lanes, state and local law. And there are numerous laws explicitly say these are not to be used by private buses like casino buses, tour buses, tech shuttle buses. And I want to know what your feeling is about that. And this has gentrification issues. This is not just like, oh, isn't there a little bit of extra space? Can't you let them? No, this is an issue that has gentrification implications. And that's an issue that's going to come back to San Francisco once we're through this pandemic.
Thank you for that, Sue. I think that's Article 600 of Division 2 of the San Francisco Transportation Code that you're referencing. I know this because I looked into the rules around vehicles that are prohibited or allowed to use transit on these lanes.
You did your homework.
I did do my homework. And the fine right now for transit violations is something between $100 and $238. It depends if the SFPD, what reason they use to cite when pulling someone over. If it's less, if it's considered a parking infraction, like a bus lane being
Manny,
blocked. Yeah.
we're talking about policies being adopted by the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency Board of Directors to ignore state and local law, like permitting tech shuttle buses to operate in public bus stops, and adopting policies that are going to allow private buses to operate in transit-only red lanes in violation of state law. And I posted a letter from the Sierra Club.
I saw that.
That explains a lot of these laws.
So I believe what you're talking about is the fact that these concerns have been raised to the SFMTA, but that there's a thinking on the SFMTA that the current use, that basically what's happening now doesn't really interfere with transit operations. That's how they feel. That they can still get it done.
EIR has ever been done. No, none. They have, there's something going on at the MTA that's behind the scenes. I've done lots of public records requests. No studies have ever been done of what the gentrification impacts are. None have been done. We have no legal ability to control the number of vehicles that might be operating in transit-only red lanes. Because if we tried to say only 100 can go there, we'd get sued.
Sue, I'm sorry, you've got to wrap it up.
I'm done.
Well, while it is important, it is also something that I would want to learn more about, because there is clearly what you're talking about is something that is an internal SFMTA decision and policy. And I want to learn more about the reasoning behind that policy before I can fully answer your question. But if you think something is afoot, would love to hear more about what you exactly specifically think is afoot. And my email is manny@welcometomannys.com. Or actually the best is manny.sfmta@gmail.com. So for SFMTA related things, you can use that email, manny.sfmta@gmail.com.
Thanks,
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you very much, Sue.
Next up is Mari Eliza.
Hi, I would just like to welcome you, Manny, to the ridiculous situation you might be putting yourself in by joining this group. But the SFMTA board. But essentially, I just wanted to say something that nobody's talked about, and that is the pressure and the stress that people are feeling now because of the situation we're in was already going on, because for the last decade, we've had this constant change. People, particularly people who take the Muni get up in the morning, they have to, if they can, look at their phone to find out whether or not their bus is running, whether or not their bus stop has been changed or moved. And this constant change, when we don't need to make these changes, I think is really the most frustrating thing that has gone on for some time. So just to let you understand that, the constant change, the basic, why are we doing it, constantly changing it? Somebody's got a job in the planning department. All they do is sit around and draw lines on a street, and then they get it done, and people don't really appreciate it.
Mhm.
One of the things they really don't appreciate is the removal of bus stops. The removal of bus stops predated, to some extent, the removal of bus lanes. And it's created this real problem for people who, especially like Van Ness. I mean, we can hardly talk about Van Ness.
15 seconds.
Okay, I'm basically done. I just wanted to mention the constant change being a real problem and really stressful. And what are the priorities and why are we having this constant change when we really need to just get people to where they're going to go? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I'm not exactly sure what the specific question is, but I hear a general complaint that there's a lot of construction, there's a lot of things moving around, things changing, and a feeling that we're just doing things to do things. And well, I would, you have been in this a lot longer than I have. And so I don't want to, I guess I would want to drill down on specifics and kind of what particular things have happened that have made you feel that way or that you've seen that have exemplified that. I will say that doing anything right now is very expensive, and the conversation is not doing a lot of things, but what things do we not do or do we stop doing? So you might be in for a period of time with a lot fewer things changing because we can't afford it. And the city has put out there pretty aggressive sustainability goals, public safety goals, and transit, and basically like ease of transit goals. And to accomplish that, we've had to build protected bike lanes and bulb outs and daylighting and automatic speed enforcement. If we're going to want to make these slow streets a little semi-permanent, that's going to require infrastructure. And so I think what people probably say is it's all about improvement, and that if you want improvements, it will require change. But there's an argument to be made that things don't either don't require changes to be improved, or we don't really need to make these improvements. So looking forward to being in conversation with you if I get confirmed. And I understand that what I am getting myself into is a lot of work and a lot of time, but I've been asked to serve my city, and it is not something that I take lightly. And I've been honored to ask, and if I am honored to have been asked, and if I have and if I am confirmed, I will be honored to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Barry. Barry, are you there? Please unmute yourself if so.
Manny, I appreciate that you've done your homework regarding the taxi industry and that you know what the SFMTA has done. However, we have a situation where some members of the staff have done some wonderful things for taxi drivers. Kate Torin, who is now being heavily relied on by the new director, Jeff Tumlin, because he's not familiar with the taxi industry, it appears, or not thoroughly involved with it. He allows her to make the decisions. This latest decision regarding banning the K medallions from the airport has done nothing. In fact, we had a meeting as the San Francisco Taxi Workers Alliance with purchase medallion holders, and they agree that this latest move has done nothing to improve the financial situation of the purchase medallion holders, considering the waits are still a minimum of 4 to 5 hours at the airport before we get a passenger. The TNCs are still taking at least 80 to 82% of the fares from the airport. So we would like some debt relief for these purchase medallion holders. And I'd like to ask you how you feel Proposition 22 and its passage is going to impact how on the taxis and on public transportation in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. So the question is on Prop 22. I don't feel like the passage of Prop 22 is going to change very much. And I think that's actually the point of Prop 22, is that the TNCs didn't want much changed. If Prop 22 had not passed, then I think you would have seen a lot of changes, because the classification of drivers as employees would have likely changed how TNCs operate in cities. And you know, these companies have raised billions of dollars and are making billions of dollars. And my sense is, if you are making billions of dollars a year, you want to stop things that are going to make it harder for you to make money. And so that's why they passed. That's why they put $200 million to pass a proposition which can only be amended by 7/8 of the state legislature. A very realpolitik move. I voted against Prop 22 and proud of my vote. And I think it's, I don't think much is going to change, Barry, and that's exactly what TNCs want. They don't want things. The status quo seems to be working pretty well with them as it relates to not classifying their drivers as employees. With the airport, you know, I correct me if I'm wrong, but the decision to allow only medallion taxi drivers to pick up at the airport is a relatively new thing. It's gone into effect just a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month or two ago.
Well,
and also in the middle of a pandemic when no one is traveling. So I would ask, you know, perhaps a little bit of patience to see if the rules at the airport might help over time as we get more travelers. And also, I'm all ears to hear of other ideas that you might have to make at least the airport situation more profitable to taxi drivers who have purchased medallions.
Well, the timing was horrible, because a lot of our fares that would have gone to us
Sorry,
going to
Barry.
people parking by the airport. Thank you.
Hate to cut. Thanks. Next, and almost last, Star. Please try and keep it brief, if you're there, Star.
I'm here, and basically my question is about safety. I've ridden the bus, and I've been attacked by high school kids and elementary kids getting off the bus, and also about them in my face in the bus. And I'd like to know what you talk about public safety. What measures SFMTA is taking, or you would encourage to take, to help ensure safety of those of us who have to ride the bus.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that question, Star. I do know that, oh, great. I do know that currently there is actually a program within the SFMTA where they have 25 folks on staff whose job it is to ride the SFMTA, the bus lines, with youth and folks who are in school to make sure that they, you know, get to where they need to go safely and aren't rowdy. I didn't know that that existed, but perhaps we could talk about allocating those 25 staff members to bus lines that, you know, perhaps they're not on, and that maybe you've experienced, sounds like you've experienced some direct contact with rowdy kids getting on and off the bus with school. But I do actually know that there's a program within the SFMTA specifically to ride with kids coming back from school. You know, I do know that as it relates to safety and bus operators and folks with disabilities, that there is currently a policy where bus operators don't help folks with disabilities on and off the bus. You know, if you're people who have a cane or a walker, the only time they'll help someone if someone is in a wheelchair and needs help securing themselves to you know, the area. And the reason that is because they do not want the bus driver taking their eye off the road. They want them focused on the road, and especially now with COVID, they do not want the bus operators interacting with the public any more than they need to. I did ask about this and why it was the policy of the SFMTA that operators do not help folks who are in, you know, who are maybe need some assistance, seniors or folks with disabilities other than wheelchairs. And the reason they gave made sense to me, that they need to keep their eyes on the road and not get up. What I will just say is, in a good city, as good Samaritans, we should be the first line of defense. And we as San Franciscans, one community, one city, should be helping our fellow transit riders if they need help. If you see someone that is with a cane or a walker or is getting attacked, you should get up and help them. You should make sure that they're at their seat and that they have everything they need. And so I would almost throw the question back on San Franciscans and say, you know, the bus operator is operating the bus. They should be the last person to get up and help someone. We should be the ones stepping up to the plate and making sure that folks who need a little bit of extra assistance can get to their seat safely.
Right, our last question we have time for is Mr. Herbert Weiner. Herbert, please go ahead. You'll need to unmute yourself. I think I can prompt you to do that. Okay, you're unmuted, Herbert. Go ahead. Or, sorry. Go ahead, Herbert. Try one more time.
It really ran better 40 years ago. And one of the casualties of the Muni Forward is that seniors and the disabled may have to walk up to a quarter of a mile to the bus stop. Now, this is really cruel. Now, I am a retired social worker. I worked with the aged and the disabled. And this is totally unacceptable. And why they continue doing this and accepting this for the, in light of the public good is beyond me. Also, what I don't like is the deletion and alteration of bus runs. Like the buses used to run on Valencia Street. They don't anymore. Clement Street has been truncated. It used to run to the ocean. And there are businesses along those corridors. So hopefully when you serve on the board, I don't want you to be a rubber stamp. I don't want you to be a yes man. I want you to be able to stand up and say no. This is very important because right now it's groupthink all the way on the MTA board.
Well, anyone that knows me knows that I know how to stand on my own 2 feet. I'm the son of a brassy Jewish lawyer from Brooklyn, my mother, and she taught me to ask lots of questions and not take anything lying down. And I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you have not watched me on the Small Business Commission, but I can assure you that I am not a rubber stamp, and that I'm tough, and I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. I'm going to be extremely available to the community and to the public. That's, as a small business owner, you have to be, right? I'm in my business, Herbert. I am here all day. I am trained to be an ear to people. And so I will take that to my role if I am confirmed to the SFMTA. And I will make every decision, I promise you this, as well informed as I can be, understanding all sides and making sure that all voices are heard, okay? Is that okay with you?
If you're not on the bus, you're under the wheels.
If you're not under the bus, you're under the wheels. Under the wheels. What a very morbid way to end questioning, I have to say. But I guess we had to end it somehow. But I guess it's appropriate.
It's a liability issue.
All right. I just want to be cognizant of everybody's time. It is 7:43 p.m. Manny and our interpreters, thank you so much for making the time to all be here and for everybody who's participating. I know you're a very busy person beyond your just operations of a business, which is enough on its own. And I also want to acknowledge our interpreters, Kai, Liliana, and Andreina, for offering their time and support. My ask to everybody here is to like and follow the Transit Justice Coalition Facebook page if you want to stay tuned for things like this. That's also one of the places we'll be posting the recording of this and our town hall with Fiona. We'll also be posting it to the YouTube page for the Richmond Senior Center.
Ooh, fancy,
yes.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Stop
screen
by.
sharing.
I also did put my email in the chat so that people, I've created a special email just in case I do get confirmed for everything related to SFMTA. It's manny.sfmta@gmail.com. I will be checking it, and please use it to reach out to me.
Thank you, Manny. And if it's okay with you, I'll add that into our Facebook and YouTube video links so people can access that as well.
Yes, that's
Cool.
totally fine with me.
If you have feedback on this event, on how we've ran it and invited people, please message us on the Transit Justice Coalition Facebook page. And with that, Thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your week. Cool.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a great night.
Coalition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you, interpreters. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate you
Thank
all.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have another cup of coffee.
Where?
About to go find out, Reggie.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Susan. Have a great night.
You too. All right. Bye, everybody.
I enjoyed the meeting.
Bye. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Well,
you all
thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.